My name is Jaclyn Corin. As he mentioned, I am now a senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, senior class president now. And so I just want to start out by saying that I am not a polished public speaker. I'm just a normal high school student standing in front of you all today. I actually missed school today to be here with you all, so thank you for that. But yeah, my everyday is still like a normal high schooler. I'm applying to colleges right now. My life is going on, but I'm also traveling the country with my friends, including David, and making sure that young people all around this country are mobilizing and activating their own communities. So basically, I'm going to start by just describing who I was before and how my life has transformed because of the shooting and because of my efforts afterwards. I am my senior class president, as I mentioned before. I was always involved in student government and working with my community and organizing and fundraising for other people. That was always what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a nurse. I was always good at science and math, and I was going to go down that path, and that has obviously completely changed. So actually, because I'm a part of my student government, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2018, I was distributing carnations around my community and around my school just to spread love and to spread joy, because obviously Valentine's Day is all about that. It's about spreading compassion and just being with your friends and your loved ones. So I actually distributed carnations in the building that was shot up, building 1200, and I was fortunate enough to finish distributing about 10 minutes before. I walked out of the same doors that the shooter walked in about 10 minutes before. And so I count my blessings every single day that I was not in the hallway then, because you never know what happens. Each and every person that we lost that day, it was just simply the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's what breaks me so much, is because none of those people deserved that at all. They were learning in their environments, they were teaching kids, they were being coaches, they were being mothers, they were being fathers, they were being friends, brothers, sisters. They're just like you all today. 96 people die every single day from gun violence. And this building right here has hundreds of people. So a large section of this room is gone every day in the United States if you make this a small version of the United States in here. And so what breaks my heart is that a lot of people don't know that statistic. A lot of people don't know that this is an epidemic that rages our country every single day, even if you don't see it in your own community. And so I think that's what I knew after the shooting. During the shooting, when I was hiding, I knew that this was something that happens every single day, and that school shootings especially are something that are common in our country. We're actually the only developed country that experiences this issue. And so as I was hiding in the classroom that day with about 40 other kids smushed in the back of my classroom, I knew what this was. I knew it was a mass shooting. I knew what was going on. It wasn't anything strange to me. I said, I'm in a school shooting right now, and I'm not going to accept that. And so once the SWAT team entered my room, they crashed the glass, spilled all over the floor, and yelled at all of us to put our hands up, something that no student, no 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old should ever have to do or experience in their lives. We stood up, we put our hands above our heads, and sprinted for our lives outside of our school that was in a community that was labeled the safest city in Florida for 8 consecutive years. 8 consecutive years. Did you know how safe I felt in my community? I've never even seen homelessness or police brutality or any kind of violence in my community at all. We called it our Parkland bubble. That's what my friends and I like to say. We were never exposed to any sort of issue that affects the entire United States as a whole. And so after we sprinted out of our classroom that day, the FBI agents questioned us. I didn't even know FBI agents were in my community. FBI was some foreign concept to me. But we were questioned, and our bags were searched, and I met my dad in the middle of the road, and we walked home. We walked 20 minutes home. I had to step over Valentine's Day teddy bears on the floor, and finally made it home to open my television screen to a helicopter view of my own school, and it said 6 dead. 6 dead, and my heart sunk to the bottom of my stomach because the fact that 6 people at that moment had been killed at my school didn't make sense to me at all. I don't even remember fully what I was feeling that day. My head was pounding, my eyes were bloodshot, and I just made sure to answer all the people that had been calling me and texting me and Facebook messaging me. I had an overwhelming amount of love and support coming through me, but I didn't really feel it. I just felt empty inside. I was confused, I was dazed. I waited for my mom to come home from the local elementary school because she teaches there, and we all came together as a family. It took me about 2 hours to answer all of the texts and emails and messages I was getting, and after that period of time, I put back the TV on and it said about 13 dead and many missing. And 13 stuck with me because I remembered that was the amount of people that died from Columbine. And I said, my school is going to have the same reputation as Columbine now. And it's again, how can one understand that when their entire life has been about education and not worrying about anything else? And so I actually had done a project on gun reform that December, so I knew a lot about the NRA, and I knew about what goes on in Congress to make sure that these tragedies keep happening, to make sure that gun manufacturers keep making money. And so I was aware of the politics behind this issue. I didn't think that it was just one person that made this happen. I knew it was a whole collection of people that allowed this to happen at my school. And so I started yelling at the TV. I started to get political right away. And that's why I posted on social media that night. Not only did I post my prayers for my school, but I also said, contact your local, state, and federal representatives now, because we cannot allow this to keep happening. And the next morning, actually, I wasn't going to be a hypocrite. I was going to do that myself. And so I immediately reached out to as many people that could connect me with someone on the state level as possible. And that very next morning, about 12 hours after the shooting, I was already on the phone with a state senator, a Florida state senator. And that day, I started organizing a trip, a lobbying trip, up to Tallahassee to bring many of my classmates up there to make sure that we had a presence in our democracy, that we weren't going to let the media just cover this as another mass shooting or another shooting and let it go. I wanted to make sure that when we had the media on us, we were the epicenter of the world at that point. We need to take that and run with it. And so I did interviews alongside David, alongside Cameron, alongside so many people at my school that knew they had to stand up immediately. And so the days after the shooting, we went to rallies, we went to protests. We never had time to heal. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to remember is that 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they sacrificed themselves, they sacrificed their emotions to do this for the world. And so that weekend, I spent every waking hour on the phone with the state senator. I didn't even know state senators existed before the shooting. And I was learning so much about government and the world itself by doing this work. And so that Tuesday and Wednesday, less than a week after the shooting, we had 3 coach buses waiting for us in Parkland, and we bussed up 7.5 hours to Tallahassee, and we slept on cots at a civic center floor. And it was just looking at that and the feeling of accomplishment. I did that. I was so proud of myself because I put my emotions aside, and I wanted to make sure that the world was seeing what Stoneman Douglas students were doing. And so we spent the very next day going to 70 different meetings with state legislators and making sure we were advocating for mental health, for gun safety. And to be honest, we didn't know about it then. But that's the important thing to remember, is that as a young person, even if you feel like you're not educated enough on an issue, you still can advocate for it. You don't have to know every single detail about something to speak up. And I think that's what deters a lot of young people today, is if they can't have a debate with some high-class politician that they can't speak up at all, that is not true at all. You can always educate yourself. You have your phones at your fingertips. You can research anything, and that's what the beauty of life is for us, and the beauty of this movement. Because the reason why we took off the way we did is because we utilized social media. and we knew how to use it properly to actually captivate millions of eyes. And so that month when we announced the march, we were working constantly every day, and I remember the day we announced the march, I couldn't describe the amount of love and support that poured in from around the world. When we thought of the name March for Our Lives, I thought there was going to be 20 marches around the world, but then slowly but surely every single day it was 100, it was 200, it was 300, and it went up to about 900 marches worldwide. We had marches in Mumbai, we had marches in London, we had marches in Australia, and that wasn't even what it was for. It was for the United States and the fact that we are the only developed country that experiences this issue. But going back, the people that made this march happen were all 14 to 20-year-olds. And that is the thing that I want every person in this room to take away. That 14 to 20-year-olds started this movement. They captivated the eyes of millions of people around the world. And if you think that you are too young to make a difference in your community, that is such an incredible falsehood. Because a group of 20 kids in Parkland, I'm sure you guys never heard of it before the shooting, did this. And we have been mobilizing teenagers around the country since that day. And so, after the march, we wanted to make sure we continued connecting with people face to face, because ultimately we made a call to action on March 24th. We brought together 850,000 people in Washington, D.C., and over 2.5 million people around the world, but we wanted to make sure that the eyes of Congress and the eyes of the United States kept focusing on gun reform, because we didn't want it to slip away. So we decided on traveling the country. We actually spent weeks planning this road trip. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's called Road to Change. And we wanted to communicate with gun violence survivors. We wanted to communicate with young leaders across this country. We wanted to host town halls. We wanted to actually make sure this issue was brought to the attention of all different communities, whether they've been affected by gun violence or not. And the cities we picked, we often get that question. We went to communities that have been affected by gun violence. We went to communities where there's very potent NRA members there, or the NRA politicians, and we especially went to places where young people could actually make the difference in the election if they turned out. And so we started our tour in Chicago, Illinois, because obviously I'm sure you all think of Chicago as the hub for gun violence in this nation. And so they actually host a peace march every single Friday during the summer, because that's when gun deaths are the highest in that city. And we marched the most dangerous streets in Chicago with those people in solidarity, because the thing about March for Our Lives, it's not just about school shootings, it's not just about mass shootings, it's about every senseless gun death that happens in this country. Suicides too. 2/3 of gun deaths actually every single day are suicides. And so we continued our travels through Chicago. We went down to Ferguson. We actually spent Father's Day with Mike Brown Sr., Mike Brown Jr.'s father. He was killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, a few years back. He was actually he actually bled out for 4 hours before anyone took him away. And it's just so disgusting, because those people in that community stood up long ago, and they did not get the media coverage we did in Parkland because of what we looked like. And so we wanted to make sure that we connected with them, because this issue relates to them as well. This issue relates to their everyday. And so we continued our travels through the Midwest. We went to Kansas, we went to Nebraska, we went to Minnesota, and we encountered people in open carry states that would have AR-15s and yell at us in our faces. And the beautiful part is that we had conversations with those people. And after those conversations, we realized that we actually agreed on more than we ever thought we would. The thing is, with this issue, the media likes to polarize gun safety. They like to think that there's two different sides, over here and over here, but when in reality, most people are right here in the center. And so through those conversations, we learned that we are a lot more similar than we are different. And so After those conversations in the Midwest, we continued through the South. We went to Texas, where we experienced more of that opposition. We went through Arizona and New Mexico, and ended up in California, where we connected with leaders in South Central LA, which is also highly affected by gun violence. And then we went up the East Coast. We went through Tallahassee, Atlanta, through Virginia Tech, all the way up to New York City. And so everything that we learned over the summer has stuck with us today. The reason why we keep going is not only because of the experiences we had on February 14th, it's the experiences we've learned through that time. It's over the past 8 months, we've collected so many different stories. I've had conversations with parents that lost their kids in the Aurora shooting, and their stories stick with me. I've had conversations with people that are from Standing Rock, North Dakota, and if you don't know what Standing Rock is or what happened there, you should educate yourself on that, because as an American, you should know what happened in Standing Rock, North Dakota, and their stories stay with me. We had conversations, like I said, in Ferguson. Mike Brown Sr. stayed with me. We had conversations in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is the third most segregated city in the United States, and those conversations stay with me. Actually, when we were in Milwaukee, we were the first white people to enter an organization's headquarters ever. And that is so incredible to me, because there were white people in that area fighting gun violence, there were Hispanic people in the area fighting gun violence, but they had never worked together. And so what Road to Change did, it was bringing people together in the same community that were working on the same thing and allowing them to unify, because the way this is going to work is if we all do this as one unified force. Actually, Road to Change wasn't all Parkland students, and I think that's a common misconception about this movement as well. It's a collection of students from around the country, because this movement may have started in Parkland, but it sure is not going to end there. And so we had students from Chicago travel with us all summer. We had a student from Milwaukee, we had a student from South Central LA, we have a student from Harlem, New York, from Montgomery County, Maryland, and we all came together to fight this issue, because gun violence affects everyone in a different way, and gun violence does not discriminate. And so it's actually quite beautiful, because I have heard so much from my friends from around the country, more so than I have in school, because even though they're my same age, they have had entirely different experiences as I have, and so we're learning from each other. And I learned about things that I would never be privileged enough to learn about in school, because the public education system does not want us to know about Standing Rock. They do not want us to know about the everyday tragedies in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I just want everyone to know in this room that you have a place in this. You always can have a voice in this movement, because gun violence does not discriminate. And so after our travels this summer, obviously the midterms are coming up, November 6th. You all better be registered at our voting. Please. Yeah. Obviously, we need to continue to captivate the energy that we all felt on March 24th, and we needed to make that push to November 6th, and that's why we have devoted our time and traveling around the country and having these conversations right here, right now, and just connecting with people. I mean, we just released a book. It's called Glimmer of Hope. We actually released it yesterday, so you all should take a read at that, because that tells the story of what February 14th through about March 24th looked like, and a little bit beyond. It was how March for Lives was really created, but there obviously is still so much more to the story. And what we're doing now is we're going around to different communities the 12 days before the midterms and mobilizing and activating the communities. We're actually busing students to vote there, to early vote, of course, and making sure young people are actually fired up for this election, because we all need to be a part of making voting cool. We need to make it a part of the culture that young people possess, because ultimately this is going to be the future of our country. We are the future, but we are also the present, so we need to make sure we are active participants in our democracy. because this is a representative democracy. It was created for us to have a say. And if we let that go, I mean, there are people that fought for our rights to vote. So you need to make sure you go out there and do your civic duty, especially for the people that don't have the privilege to vote, the undocumented, the people that are incarcerated. So please use your power and use your voice and actually make a difference. And so, yes. So if you are a young person on this campus, make sure that all of your friends are registered to vote and make sure they're active participants in our democracy. I mean, my everyday is actually having conversations with student organizers around the country. March for Our Lives basically has a chapter system where we are constantly calling organizers around the country and making sure that areas that haven't been affected by gun violence are making sure that their communities never get touched by it, or people that experience gun violence every day are making sure that that is not a normal thing. Places where gun violence happens every day, the kids feel hopeless because it's a normalized thing in their community. And so having those conversations, honestly, has been a privilege for me because I just get to experience the power that all these kids possess. Because what made me so nervous back after the march is that young people wouldn't get involved and this would die out. But this is only the start. This is only the start of building an infrastructure and the thought that young people are going to be the most powerful generation and the most powerful voice in our society for generations to come. And that's been a pleasure for me to work with them around the country. And as he said before, I'm going to devote my life to this issue because I used to want to be a nurse, but doing this every single day for the past 8 months has been a pleasure and an honor. And oftentimes we get asked, how do you do it? You went through a tragedy. You went through something so difficult, but you still keep going. And obviously, it's incredibly hard. I'm still a senior in high school. I still have to pass the building that was shot up every single morning. That's how I start my day. But we have to move forward, and that's what I always tell people, is that there are bad days, and there are good days. There are days where I'm empowered, but there are days where I don't want to get out of my bed. And I think that's what hurts so much, because I want to keep going every single day. But it's important to understand for everyone in this room, if you're ever a part of social activism and social justice pushes, that it's okay to pass the baton off to someone else. It's okay, because you don't have to be Superman. If you care about something, put your all into it, but you can take a step back at times too. And so, but the hardest part is also, like I was saying, collecting all of these stories, collecting all of the emotions of the people that we've met and moving forward with that, because it just weighs down on you some days. But what I like to tell people is, if I can do it, you can do it. And if you can make the difference in one person, if you can change one person's opinion, if you can empower one person, then that's enough. Then you made a difference that day. And if you do that every single day, those people will add up and you will be a change maker. And so I'm going to leave you with that. I'm really happy to share this night with you, and I can't wait to answer your questions.